Hello, everyone. Catchy1383 with Catchy Gaming, and I'm a bit late to this. Sort of. So, a rumor came out that Nintendo wanted to do a remake of the Ocarina of Time. Nothing really particularly new about that. Nintendo's been doing a boatload of remakes, and that would seem like a pretty safe one to actually remake. And considering that they did Link's Awakening, I guess it's somewhat plausible, but I'm not going to get into too much details. Apparently, there's some questionable reliability on the person who put this rumor out. But it sort of encouraged, I don't know, let's say a thought experiment with me in particular. If they're going to also remake another Legend of Zelda game outside of Ocarina of Time, and we'll just add Majora's Mask into that as well to some degree. Yes, they're not the same game, but they use a lot of the same assets. What game would I actually sort of want to remake? So, yes, they have the 3DS version of the games. I wouldn't call those remakes, they're more like remasters. And I do prefer the Ocarina of Time on the 3DS versus the 64 version, only because it's a lot smoother of a game and stuff like that. Mixed feelings about the Majora's Mask one, mainly because they mess with some of the boss battles. When I say some, I mean all of them, along with messing with the Zora swimming mechanics. That was borderline unforgivable, what they did to the Zora swimming mechanics. My first thoughts sort of strayed to the Legend of Zelda DS games, the Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks, mainly due to the awfulness of how these games controlled, which would fundamentally mean designing pretty much the whole entire game from the ground up if you're getting rid of basically the touchscreen controls, along with the dual screen gameplay and all the other fun stuff that's associated with it. And there's a other slew of issues. I don't know if you're a fan of the art style. I am not. Don't particularly care for Toon Link's art style. The giant head, the big eyeballs, and the tiny little feet, although you really can't see that on the DS version. It's more about the Wind Waker in the terms of that. And someone out there might say that the art style's aged well. I would say sure, depending on your subjective opinion. Personally, yeah, it was awful back in 2003 and it's still awful today. I digress. That was a tangent that didn't need to be gone down. Then I also thought about the Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Season games. Both made by Capcom, and I guess you could also put the Minish Cap in there as well as a possibility. But I thought about these more than the Minish Cap, mainly because it's similar to that of Link's Awakening slash the original Legend of Zelda. And it would probably work with that diorama style that they like to use. Or maybe I should say came up with, I don't know, either way. Which then led me on a sort of trail of thought to the original NES game, with a handful of people attempting to do a bit of a remake with that and getting the litigious hammer of Nintendo pounded on their head for doing so. I mean, at this point, you should know better. I don't necessarily agree with it, but yeah, you know they're gonna do maybe something not so great with you in terms of legal repercussions, or maybe just bury in litigation. That's probably just not a safe thing to do. Which then leads me to the sequel, The Legend of Zelda 2 Link's Adventure. Some people like to call it the black sheep of the family of Zelda games. I guess to some degree that is still true. Although personally I would more or less point to the Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks for that. I'm not entirely sure how I'd classify The Legend of Zelda 2 at this point. Maybe that family member that went to jail and came back out jacked and hard as hell. But yes, it is definitely the most difficult of the Zeldas out there. So this one, yes, is a bit odd considering they're trying to do something different with it. More in line with an RPG than an action adventure game. Now, I wouldn't try and do anything like the diorama art style. I don't think that would work. It'd be kind of awkward. I was thinking maybe they would do something a little bit more stylistic. An example of what I mean by that would be Wario Land Shake It for the Wii. I'm going to thank Longplay Archives for their footage. Didn't really ask them, but something tells me they're not going to really say no. But I'll post a link to their video so you can watch the whole thing if you're really all that curious. So, yes, I would probably like to see something along these lines, a little bit maybe more animated than what you would typically see. Yeah, it's kind of encroaching on the CDI Zelda games, but I think this would probably work out better because one, it's an official Zelda game. Two, I feel like it'd be keeping in the spirit of the side-scrolling action of the game as well, instead of maybe potentially doing like a 2.5 3D game instead. Do something different to mix it up just a little bit. So let's face it, there's some things that probably be nice if they changed, like the iron knuckles here. Particularly the blue ones, where they just practically block everything without breaking a sweat. Not necessarily a bad thing, there is some finesse to the game that I haven't quite grasped. At least in terms of landing blows. I'm not entirely sure. I pretty much just devolve into flailing attacks and hope I land them. But these blue iron knuckles in particular are pretty egregious in my opinion, with them backing off to the side of the screen where you can't attack, and they can't attack you at least, but one of them's a boss. Yeah. And then you just saw on the screen the blind jumping where you hope that something is going to come crashing into you and sending you backwards to your death in a pool of lava. That's some Castlevania level bullshit that I would probably like to see go away, where they don't make the enemies spawn and you hope you don't get knocked back. That was like the only instance that happened, but it... Well, let me rephrase that. That was the only incident in this particular palace. It happened in a couple of other places while I was playing through the game again for footage and just to say I beat The Legend of Zelda 2 again. But yes, being knocked back into a pool of instant death is not particularly great, especially when you only have 3 lives, unless you spend a great deal of time kind of grinding it out to get those extra lives. I mean, there's other things like this particular hallway where these floating heads shoot projectiles at you. Yes, they'll kind of match the plane that you're on more or less, but they come from both directions, and it makes it really, really hard to kind of block their shots. Here, just out of desperation of not getting hit, I just said, screw it, and I let them more or less hit me because I would never get anywhere if I just focused on trying to block all their shots. Maybe tweak that a little bit so they don't appear behind you. Something along those lines. Fire less often, maybe a little bit slower. I don't know, but it actually gets used multiple times, and you run into situations where you cannot block all the shots even if you tried because there's multiple heads from multiple directions. Then there's the elephant in the room when it comes to The Legend of Zelda 2 Link's Adventure. Death Mountain. The only time that it's ever really lived up to its name in a Legend of Zelda game. But you experience this early in the game, like very early in the game, and it is a huge difficulty spike from the first palace, which then you have to proceed through Death Mountain after that to just progress through the game. And they give you enemies that hit like bricks, and you cannot block their attacks. Eventually, yes, you will be able to, but by the time you get the spell that allows you to block their axes, you're moved on from this part of the game completely. Unless you're some kind of masochist returning because reasons. Maybe tone it down a little bit. Actually make some of their attacks blockable. It's not entirely unreasonable if you ask me. And before anyone says, get good, scrub. So this wasn't my second playthrough. It's been a while since I played. I played a couple months ago planning to make a video, but you can see there I died 31 times. This time I dropped it down to 14. With at least 3 of those being in Death Mountain itself. Some of those were intentional deaths in order to be able to save, because that's how this game works. So that's another sort of area of improvement they could potentially make, being able to save the game without having to die. Can I just mention that the batteries that I have in these cartridges are just like the most amazing things in the world? I've had these games since the 1980s, and the save battery is still going. Most people have to change them out, but these, I guess, are just like super batteries. I mean, yeah, there's probably some enemies here or there that some people might not want to change or might want to change. That was just sort of like the highlights for me were the alligator enemies called Dario? At least according to the instruction manual, I'm hoping I'm getting that right. The blue iron knuckles, the red ones and the orange ones are fine. They're actually pretty easy to beat. And maybe get rid of the death traps by pools of instant death. And, you know, I feel like this game probably could be a lot better and probably would have been received a lot better, with a lot of people citing the difficulty spike of the game, keeping them from playing it. Anyways, if I were to ask for a remake, I would go with The Legend of Zelda 2. I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts on that? Anyways, if you made it this far, thanks for watching. Have a good one.